Healing in Final Fantasy XIV is a little bit different than other MMOs, and to really master it, you have to walk before you run. This guide is built to help healers take their first few steps into healing by explaining some of the basic core concepts you'll apply in-game no matter which healer you choose. Now let me warn you, this guide goes into a lot of great tips and tricks you'll use daily, which led to the original guide being a bit lengthy. So to make it more manageable and fun-sized, I've decided to split it into a series and put them all in a playlist. Feel free to jump around as needed or watch the series from start to finish. That being said, I'm Tali, your everyday Eorzean. Let's get started. First things first, let's talk about understanding your role as a healer. Your role is so important because everyone's counting on you, and in a pinch, a good healer can save the run from disaster. As a healer, your primary directive is to keep the party alive, which includes you, by the way. When not healing, it's the healer's job to do whatever they can to help the party, which means casting damage spells. Now, I know doing damage isn't usually part of the healer's kit. It might not be what you signed up for, but give me some time and I bet I'll change your mind. Before we get into that though, let's just talk about understanding some of the base game mechanics. The HUD, or the heads-up display, is where we want to start first. The better we build it, the better healers we become. When you're designing your HUD, make sure the information you need is easily visible, and if you're a clicker, easily clickable. Now, I'm not going to tell you where to put things, because everyone's preferences are different, but I will point out the things you need to keep an eye on. These are things I use all the time that you may want to consider adjusting. Let's start with your hotbar. These buttons can be whatever you want them to be, and you can change them through the keybinds. I play keyboard and mouse and have smaller hands, so it's a bit uncomfortable for me to reach past the number 7 on the keyboard with my left hand. So to make it easier for me to play, I only bind up to the number 7, but I use different combinations. For my top bar, I use Control 1 through 7, my middle bar 1 through 7, and my bottom bar, I use Alt 1 through 5 and Shift 1 through 5. But it doesn't have to just be numbers. You can use letters or any combination on the keyboard, but keep in mind, some buttons are defaulted to other menu functions. You can still use them, but you'll have to replace them with something else. Not only can you change the keybinds, but you can change the placement, the composition, the size, all kinds of things. Just make it comfortable for you. While we're talking about hotbars, I'm going to drop a more advanced tip. Put some thought and effort into where your buttons go, and then mimic them on your other jobs to help with muscle memory. So for me, Swift Cast is always number 6, no matter what healer or caster I'm on, and my cures or self-curing abilities are always on my top hotbar. By doing that, instead of learning several different layouts, I'm really just learning the one with a few exceptions. Next up, let's talk about your party list. Your party list is going to give you a lot of information. It's going to tell you who has what buff or what debuff, who needs healing, who has mana for raises, who's casting what, and where people are on the hate list. So it's good to keep that somewhere close. It doesn't need to be in the middle of the screen, but it does need to be in a place where you can easily check it without having to search for it, so you don't miss a mechanic. Other things I keep front and center are my progress bar for slide casting and movement, the enemy list to see which big bad is casting what, my focus target bar so I always know what the boss is doing, my status effects, limit gauge, healing gauge, and actual target bar. Now later in this series, we'll go over what each of these do, but for now, just make sure you can see them. Next up, global cooldowns versus off-global cooldowns. All combat in this game revolves around the global cooldown system. It's the buffer time the game forces between actions. When I initiate a healing or a damage spell, the game will start my global cooldown, and I'll be unable to start a new spell until the cooldown is complete. Now, I may finish my spell before the cooldown finishes, but it doesn't matter. I have to wait till it finishes before I can start casting my next spell. The starting global cooldown for Final Fantasy XIV is 2.5 seconds. So if I have a spell that's instant and there's no cast time, what am I supposed to do during that downtime? Just wait? Of course not. That's where off-global cooldowns come into play. Off-global cooldowns are typically abilities and operate on their own individual cooldown, ranging anywhere from 30 seconds to 3 minutes in some cases, meaning they aren't bound by the same restrictions. So if you're casting an instant spell, you can use an off-global cooldown ability while you wait. This is called weaving, and that is a super oversimplified explanation for it. When you first start leveling, you're not going to have a lot of OGCDs to weave, but once you hit in-game, they'll become an important part of your gameplay, especially for healers. So it's a good thing to know early and start practicing. Like the HUD system, I could and probably will spend an entire video dedicated to the nuance of weaving, but if you don't want to wait, there are a ton of videos out there. Moving on from that, let's talk targeting. Nothing is more frustrating than trying to save a party member and being unable to target them, so it's good to work out now how you're going to target people. Now, there's a couple ways you can do this on PC. Sorry controller players, I play on mouse and keyboard and am absolutely horrific on controller, but I'll see if I can't find you a good guide and leave it in the description for you. Okay, back to keyboard and mouse. You can do click targeting, keybind targeting, or macros. Click targeting means you're using your mouse to either click on the player character or on their name in the party list to cast a spell on them. This is my preferred method of healing. I find it easier to click on the party list as opposed to the character because my eyes are usually already there, and it's a static place on my screen. When I try to click on characters, I end up chasing them down and it takes way longer. Keybind targeting is also a good, reliable way to do it. I believe the game defaults to setting the players in your party to F1 through F8, but like I said earlier, I have small hands, so F5 through F8 aren't super comfortable for me to reach. If it isn't a problem for you, this might be even easier than click targeting, because you aren't having to adjust your mouse. That leaves macro targeting. There are several macros out there you can use to assist with targeting for specific abilities or spells. You can even use macros to use mouse over targeting. It's like click targeting, but you don't actually have to click them. You can just hover your mouse point over them while you activate the spell, and the spell will cast on them. Macro targeting can be great for a lot of players and make the game much more manageable, but it can be finicky and it can delay some of your actions, so keep that in mind when using them. That being said, these small delays won't matter for a majority of the player base, but if you're coming into the game with the desire to get into high-skilled, high-level combat content, you may want to limit your use of macros and get more accustomed to the other methods of targeting. Am I saying that you can't do high-level endgame with macros? No, it's still doable, though it might prove a bit more challenging. Okay, that's enough game mechanics for now. In the next video, we'll go over the different kind of healers and, more importantly, understanding how to heal. But before you go, don't forget to give this video a like and comment down below if you learned something new. I'll see you in the next video, Eorzeans.